The moment I saw the photo, something inside me fell apart. It was on his phone, hidden inside a folder with no name. But I found it. My hands were shaking. I knew what I was looking at. He was standing beside her. She was smiling. He was not looking at the camera. He was looking at her. And I knew. That look was no accident. I sat down on the edge of our bed. The room was quiet, but my heart was loud. I had spent years trying to believe we were okay. I had smiled through silence, laughed through distance, and hoped through pain. But that photo told me something I could no longer ignore. He loved her, not me. The days before that moment were full of small signs. He had stopped calling me by the names he used to. His eyes moved past me when I spoke. His hugs were shorter. His goodbyes were colder. He said he was busy at work, and I wanted to believe him. I told myself he was tired, stressed, or going through something he did not want to share. I gave him space. I gave him time. But he gave that space and time to someone else. It was not always like this. We met at university. He was smart, kind, and full of dreams. I was quiet and careful, but he made me feel safe. He said I was the only one who understood him. He said he wanted to build a life with me, and I believed him. When he asked me to marry him, I said yes with my whole heart. In the first years, we were happy. We had little money but big dreams. We stayed up late talking about the future. We went on long walks. We cooked simple meals and made each other laugh. But time changes things. People change. I changed too. I became smaller without even noticing. I started to think his happiness was more important than mine. I said yes to things I did not want. I stopped asking for what I needed. When he forgot something important, I forgave him quickly. When he hurt me with words, I told myself not to be too sensitive. I thought love meant patience, even when it was one-sided. One afternoon, I came home early from work. I wanted to surprise him with his favorite meal. I opened the fridge and found nothing. I called him, and he said he had dinner plans. He did not ask what I had planned. He did not even sound sorry. I sat alone that evening, staring at the cold table. I felt foolish. I told myself it was nothing. But it was not nothing. It was everything. Then there were the weekends. He used to spend them with me. We went to the market. We drank coffee in the sun. But slowly, those weekends disappeared. He said he had errands. He said he needed time for himself. But later, I found out that she was there too. Her name was Emma. She was new at his office. Young, confident, always smiling. I did not blame her. I blamed myself. I looked in the mirror and wondered what was wrong with me. I thought maybe I had become boring. Maybe I had lost the spark I once had. I tried harder. I bought new clothes. I changed my hair. I smiled more. I stopped complaining, but no matter what I did, his heart was not with me. One night, I saw a message on his screen. It was not long, only a few words, but those words hit me like a wave. They were sweet and full of care, the kind of words he had not said to me in a long time. My hands went cold, my stomach turned, but I said nothing. Before we continue, I would love to know, where are you listening from? Which city? Which country? Share it in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to hear more every week. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. I moved through the rooms quietly, afraid of breaking the silence. I cooked dinner, but he often ate out. I watched shows alone. I went to bed early, but I could not sleep. I kept looking at the space beside me, where he once lay close. Now he turned away, or sometimes he did not come home at all. One evening, I walked past a small park. It was late. I had gone for a walk to clear my head. I saw two people on a bench. I stopped. It was him. With her. They were laughing. He was touching her hand. I froze. My feet felt heavy. I did not know if they saw me. I turned away quickly and walked home. My heart felt numb. That night, I packed a bag. Only a few things. Clothes. A toothbrush. A photo of my parents. I left a note. I did not want a fight. I did not want to cry in front of him again. I had done that too many times. I needed to leave before I lost myself completely. I went to my sister's house. She opened the door and saw my face. She did not ask many questions. She hugged me and said I could stay as long as I needed. Her house was small, but it felt warm. It smelled like cinnamon and coffee. I cried on the sofa. I cried in the shower. I cried in silence, but I felt safe. The first morning, I woke up to the sound of birds. I opened the window and saw the sun. It had been a long time since I noticed the sky. I made tea and sat in the kitchen. I did not speak. I did not move much, but I was there, fully present. That was a start. I started to write in a notebook, small things, what I saw, what I felt. I wrote about the color of the leaves, the way the light came through the curtains. I wrote about the silence, the kind that does not hurt. I remembered who I was before him, before I made myself small. I remembered I loved music. I played old songs on my phone. I danced a little, alone, but not lonely. I went to the library. I read books again. I walked slowly. I smiled at people. I saw children playing. I noticed flowers. I bought one and put it by my bed. My sister told me I looked different. Not sad. Not broken. Just different. Softer. Lighter. I still cried sometimes, but not every day. I still thought of him, but not with pain. I started to feel whole. One day I saw myself in the mirror. I stood straight. My eyes looked clear. My heart was quiet. I touched my own face and said, "You are enough." No one heard me, but that did not matter. I heard myself, and for the first time in years, I believed it. In the weeks that followed, I made small changes. I started drinking more water. I woke up earlier and opened the curtains to let the morning light in. I took slow walks without a plan, and I left my phone at home. I watched the world move around me. Mothers with strollers, old couples sitting on benches, children chasing pigeons. I had missed all these things while trying to hold together a life that was already broken. At first, the silence felt heavy, but over time, it became soft. I listened to it and found myself inside it. I noticed how my thoughts were calmer now. I was not thinking about him every minute. I was thinking about me, about what I liked, about who I used to be before I bent myself to fit into someone else's world. The first time I saw him again, I was standing outside a small cafe with a cup of tea in my hand. It was cold, and the steam was rising gently. I was not thinking about him that day. My mind was full of other things. The painting I had started, the recipe I wanted to try, the book waiting on my table. Then I turned my head and saw him across the street. He was alone. He looked older. His shoulders were not as straight. His eyes looked tired. For a second, he stopped walking. Our eyes met. I did not move. I did not smile. I felt no anger, only distance. He raised his hand a little like a quiet hello, and I nodded once. That was all. He did not cross the street. He did not come to talk. He turned and walked away. I watched until he disappeared. Then I looked down at my tea. It had gone cold. I threw it away and walked home. My heart was calm. That night, I sat by my window. I thought about how I used to wait for him, how I had begged for his attention in silence. I had hoped for messages that never came. I had planned meals he never ate. And now, I had seen him again. Nothing inside me broke. That was my freedom. I began to see the past like a photo album. I could look at it when I wanted, but I did not live in it anymore. I was making new memories now, ones that belonged only to me. One morning, I got an email from the community center. They were starting a weekly book club. I signed up. The first meeting was quiet. A few strangers, some nervous smiles, and a circle of chairs. We talked about a simple story, one about starting over after loss. I listened more than I spoke, but when I did speak, I surprised myself. My voice was steady. My words were clear. I was not afraid of being seen. There was a man in the group named Ethan. He was kind and quiet. He spoke gently and always looked people in the eye. I noticed he listened with care. He never rushed to speak. He never tried to take up all the space in the room. I respected that. After a few meetings, we began to walk home in the same direction. We talked about books, films, and simple things like the weather or the best bakery in town. He never asked about my past, and I never asked about his. It was enough to be present. One evening, we both reached a street corner and stopped. The sky was pink with the last light of day. He looked at me and smiled. I smiled back. It was small, but it meant something. I walked home slowly, thinking about how gentle the world could feel when no one was pulling you down. I still thought about the woman he chose over me. I wondered what she had that I did not, but those thoughts did not hurt like before. I saw now that his choice had nothing to do with my worth. It was about who he was, not who I was. He had chosen a different life, and so had I, a better one. My sister and I celebrated her birthday with a small dinner. She hugged me and whispered that she was proud of me. She said I had come back to life in ways she had not expected. I smiled and told her that I was proud of me too. I meant it. I started doing small things for others. I helped an old woman carry her groceries up the stairs. I left a note for my neighbor when her cat went missing and helped her find it under the garden shed. I baked cookies and shared them with the children next door. These moments filled me, not because I wanted praise, but because they reminded me that I could give from a place of strength, not emptiness. I wrote more often now, pages and pages. Sometimes I cried while writing, but not from pain, from truth, from release. I wrote about the girl I used to be, the one who waited too long, the one who hoped too much. Then I wrote about the woman I had become, the one who learned how to let go. One night, I opened the red notebook and flipped through the pages. At the end, I wrote one last line. I love the woman I am becoming. Then I closed it and placed it beside my bed. Weeks passed, then months. I saw Ethan often, sometimes in the book club, sometimes at the cafe. We talked more now, laughed more, but we both moved slowly. We both knew the weight of broken things. We respected the pace of healing. One Saturday, we walked through a quiet garden. The sun was warm, and the flowers were in full bloom. I looked at him and thought about how much had changed. I did not feel the need to hold his hand or hear sweet words. It was enough to walk beside someone who saw me as I was. I realized then that love does not need to rush. It does not need to chase or beg. Real love walks with you. It grows quietly, like roots under the ground, strong and deep. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again. I wore a soft blue dress. I brushed my hair and looked at my reflection. I saw strength. I saw peace. I saw a woman who had lost herself in someone else's story but had found her way back. I turned off the light and got into bed. My window was open. The breeze was gentle. I listened to the quiet and felt safe. I was not waiting for anyone to complete me. I was already whole. One morning, I helped my sister in her small kitchen garden. We planted mint and basil in a wooden box. The earth was cold in my hands, but it felt honest. As I pressed seeds into the soil, I thought about how long I had ignored my own needs. I had watered his life and let mine dry up. Later that week, I visited the community center. There was a list of free classes on the wall. One caught my eye: beginner's art. I had never held a paintbrush, but I liked the idea of colors. I signed up. The room was bright and full of strangers. Nobody knew my name or my story. That made it easier to breathe. The teacher gave us paper and told us to paint how we felt. I painted a sky. It had both dark clouds and soft light. It was not perfect, but it felt real. When I looked at it, I saw myself, a person still in pain, but not lost. I passed a bookstore on my way home. The window was full of new books, but what caught my eye was a simple red notebook. I went in and bought it. That night, I opened it and began to write. Not about him, about me. I wrote about the first day I learned to ride a bike. I wrote about the time I won a school prize. I wrote about the smell of rain in spring. These were pieces of me I had forgotten. Each word felt like a step back to who I was. Every day, I added a little more. I cooked something I liked. I played music I used to dance to when I was younger. I looked in the mirror and tried to see myself with kind eyes. I was still tired, still healing, but I was no longer disappearing. Some nights were hard. I would remember his smile or the sound of his voice in the morning. I would wonder if he missed me, but I did not let those thoughts stay too long. I reminded myself that missing someone does not mean they belong in your life. It only means they mattered. Once. I walked past a flower shop one evening. The smell of fresh roses came through the open door. I went in without thinking. I bought one single rose and placed it in a glass of water by my bed. It made the room feel warmer. I looked at it each night and reminded myself that I deserved small, beautiful things too. I began to notice how people looked at me differently. Maybe because I walked with more care. Maybe because I no longer looked like I was waiting for something. My sister said my face had changed, that I looked more alive. I smiled when she said that. I felt it too. One Sunday morning, I returned to the park where I used to sit with him. I sat on a bench by the lake and watched the ducks move across the water. I thought I would feel pain, but I did not. I felt calm, peaceful. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I was learning to live beside it, not inside it. I pulled out my notebook and wrote a sentence. I am still here, and I am becoming whole again. I read it twice. Then I looked at the sky and took a long breath. I did not know what the future held. I did not know if I would love again. But I knew one thing now. I would never lose myself for someone else again. My life was mine, and I was ready to live it. Months passed, and the seasons began to change again. The warm days of summer slowly turned to the quiet colors of autumn. The leaves fell softly, covering the sidewalks like old memories. I started to enjoy early evenings, soft sweaters, and the sound of the wind through the trees. Everything felt slower, and that pace suited me. I had learned how to enjoy my own company. I made a habit of taking myself out, to bookstores, to the park, even to lunch. I no longer felt strange sitting alone at a table. I did not look at couples and wonder why I was not one of them. I looked at myself and felt calm. I no longer needed to be chosen to feel valuable. One morning, I received a letter in the post. It was from him. I stood in the hallway holding the envelope for a long time. My fingers were still, but my mind was loud. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Another part wanted to read every word. In the end, I opened it. The letter was short. He said he was sorry. He wrote that he had made mistakes and that he missed me. He said he had ended things with her and thought of me often. He wanted to meet, to talk, to try again. He asked for a second chance. I read it twice. Then I placed it on the table and went for a walk. I needed air. I needed space. As I walked through the trees, I thought about everything I had been through. The nights I cried alone. The mornings I forced myself to smile. The silence that filled my heart when I lived in his shadow, and the light that came back when I left. I did not feel angry. I did not feel sad, but I did feel clear. I had already given too much of my life to a man who did not see me. I had worked hard to find myself again. I had built a quiet joy from the ground up. I could not give that away. That evening, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter back. I thanked him for his words. I told him I had forgiven him, not for him, but for my own peace. I told him I hoped he would grow and become better, but I said no to the meeting. I said no to starting again. I wished him well and ended the letter with care, but also with strength. After I mailed the letter, I stood at the corner of the street and watched people pass. Life was still moving, and so was I. The days that followed were quiet. No more letters. No more thoughts about what could have been. I began to write new pages in my notebook. Not about him, not about pain, but about the life I was creating. I wrote about the classes I enjoyed, the meals I cooked, and the little moments that made me smile. One Saturday afternoon, I went to a music festival in a nearby town. There were small tents, soft lights, and local bands playing songs I had never heard. I stood among strangers, feeling free. I danced slowly to a gentle song. The wind moved through my hair, and the sky was full of color. In that moment, I felt more alive than I had in years. That evening, Ethan called. He had started volunteering at a shelter for women. He said the stories he heard reminded him of strength and of me. We talked for an hour, maybe 2. Not about love, not about the past, but about purpose, kindness, and quiet courage. We did not call each other every day. We did not promise anything. We let things unfold naturally, and that was what made it special. There was no pressure, only presence. Over time, I began to see him more often. We cooked meals together, shared books, and took long walks. Sometimes we sat in silence. Sometimes we laughed for hours. He never asked me to be more than I was. He never asked me to change. He accepted me, fully, gently, and without fear. One evening, as we sat by the lake, he reached out and took my hand. Not quickly, not with force. It was a quiet gesture. I looked at him and smiled. There was no rush, no loud heartbeat, just peace. And peace is a kind of love, too. I never told him everything about my past, but he understood. He saw the parts of me that had been broken and never treated them like damage. He treated them like survival. That winter, I published a small collection of writings, only a few copies, but it meant the world to me. It was called After the Fall. The last page held one simple line: I found my worth when I stopped waiting to be seen. When I saw it printed, I cried, not from sadness, but from the joy of knowing I had come so far. Now, I wake up each day with a soft heart and a strong mind. I make tea, light a candle, and sit by the window. I do not know what tomorrow will bring, but I know I can face it, because I know who I am now. I am not what someone else failed to love. I am who I decided to become. He may have loved her more, but I learned to love myself best, and that love, the quiet, steady